You all wanted original content? This is what you'll get. I'm Stevie Blunder, and I went to a tournament and floodgated a child, and went 8-0 with Runick Stun, also known as Stun 2. In this video, I'm going to give you the deck list, a brief breakdown on what the deck is, how the deck plays, its general win conditions, and why I believe it's so well positioned in the current metagame. So first and foremost, here's the list. If you want to click off, just take a screenshot, go to Dueling Book and your local OTS and have fun. But let's get into the meat and the potatoes and why I decided to pick up this list. So I go to a lot of non-OTS California local events, and Cali is arguably the most competitive Yu-Gi-Oh region in North America outside of maybe New York, which means that locals are flooded with nothing but the absolute best decks. I remember going one day and outside of me and 3 literal children, an entire 36-man locals consisted of nothing but fire and Silent Force. I went 1-3 with Lab that day, and now I needed to make an honest assessment with myself and play a deck that could realistically contend with Fire and Silent Force that didn't cost me an arm and a leg. And during testing sessions, my friend Kelvin came up with this monstrosity, which was furthered by Brian Chen, yes, the scammer special himself, what you're looking at, which is Runick Stun. Now the deck does 2 things extremely well, which is draw you a ton of cards and annoy the absolute shit out of your opponent. Your opponent, just knowing you're on this deck, will tilt them into oblivion, and seeing any floodgate will make their IQ points drop by like 30. There's this thing in poker called tilt equity, where there is value in winning with garbage hands just to make your opponents play worse, because they're constantly thinking to themselves, I can't believe I lost to this type of garbage, and playing the most dog shit cards in existence, like Synchro Zone and Card Trader. Like, your opponents will wish they were European and could quit this game for One Piece. Now, the general win condition of this deck is to draw into your floodgates, stall infinitely with them alongside your runic spells, and to eventually deck out your opponent or have them walk out of the locals in frustration. Now, what makes this deck so specifically good is the fact that it is an extremely underrepresented deck and will likely remain that way due to the current shape of the format. See, Yu-Gi-Oh players don't really want to play stun decks. They want to play decks where there is a degree of back and forth or some sort of combo involved. No one wants to be the guy who sits on a rivalry for 12 turns. That in turn gives extreme boost to decks like Fire Piles and Silent Force in terms of representation, which causes people to slot in more monster focused hand traps and board breakers like Veiler, Nibiru, and Enemy Controller as their non-engine slots, which the majority of which is completely dead versus this deck. Just by playing this deck, you essentially negate a third of your opponent's main deck, and sometimes even 2/3 of your opponent's main and side deck. When you take a look at Jesse Cotton's deck from the UDS, a lot of these cards have basically no application versus Runick Stun. Like, what are they gonna do with a Nibiru or a Ghost Sister? Overall, deck building trends that line up extremely well for Snake Eye and Silent Force do not line up well versus stun piles such as Runick Stun. Additionally, these decks don't actually have a great matchup versus Runick when it comes to their general game plan. Most of Fire King Snake Eye or Pure Snake Eye's interruption comes in the form of Monster Disruption, in which this deck just does not give a single fuck about for the most part, and Pure Snake Eye and Silent Force's Omni Negate boards can be broken down or crippled with certain 2 to 3 card combinations of hands. All these reasons put together are what drew me to the deck, and which is why I am piloting this for the current Yu-Gi-Oh format. Plus the fact that I own this deck in Max Rarity already kind of does help the fact that I do want to play this deck. Like, I even own like CR Tikaboo. This card's $20. Now, let's get into the card by card. First of all, we're playing 2 Amano Awado. Amano Awado, Time Tearing Morganite, Synchro Zone, they're all part of these suites of cards where it is completely fine to not open them because you are realistically going to draw into them over the course of your combo / game / whatever. You do not need to open these cards. It is completely fine to draw into them, which you most likely will. These are cards where, as funny as it is to say, it's completely fine to see some of the time, but not all of the time. Now, Amano Awado is much better at breaking established boards when going second, as well as protecting yourself from hand traps relative to border in the main deck. There are a lot of instances where you can normal an Amano Awado and run over, say, an IP Masquerena, an SP Little Knight, maybe even a Formula Synchron, just because Amano Awado has a big ass booty and insulates you from monster effects, which is extremely relevant. Next up, we've got Runick Destruction, Runick Dispelling, Flashing Fire, Freezing Curses, Golden Droplet, Slumber, Smiting Storm, Tip, and Double Fountain. Now, all of these are pretty self-explanatory. Dispelling is, sure, whatever, it's just an extra Runick name, but what needs a little bit of justification is Runick Golden Droplet, which by all means is a pretty ass card. I mean, you're giving your opponent a draw, and you're just kind of milling for. Now, the only reason why you play this is for game 1 scenarios where you need another activatable card that your opponent will not draw into a board breaker and you can activate onto an empty board. Because let's be real, nobody is maining Cosmic Cyclone and nobody is maining Duster who is trying to seriously win events. Now, Golden Droplet is completely fine in game 1, but you will be removing this a lot in your games 2 and 3. In these game 2 and 3 scenarios, it is a lot better to take out Runick Golden Droplet for a bunch of, infinitely better cards that you have in your side deck, because Golden Droplet does have that slightly increased chance of helping your opponent draw into something like an Evenly Matched, a Cosmic Cyclone, a Typhoon, something similar along those lines. But for game 1s, it is completely serviceable and it's pretty good. Now, onto the consistency cards, we're playing Terraforming. Now, Terraforming might seem a little weird considering we're playing 16 copies of Emergency Teleport that also say Terraforming, but there are enough cards in this deck that restrict you from special summoning that sometimes just getting a raw way to Runick Fountain that doesn't commit you to a special summon and a discard in a deck where basically every single card in your hand is relevant can mean the difference between securing a win and being down just enough resources that you get cinched out by, actual real decks. And Terraforming, I feel, is just absolutely great. It does lose to Droll, but I mean, if you get hit by Droll, wahali, they better have it. Next up, we're playing Card Demise. Oh my god, this card says draw 3. If you resolve Card Demise, you win the game. We're also playing One Day of Peace, the greatest stall card ever printed. It says draw a card and you don't take damage. If you resolve this alongside something like a Morganite and you get to sit on a Floodgate and kind of just chill out for like the next turn and a half, you are basically in a golden position. We're playing One Pot of Desires. I hate activating this card, but sometimes you really do just need that additional little draw power and to just really find your floodgates, you know what I mean? And Triple Pot of Duality. It's like Prosperity, but it doesn't lock you into drawing cards. And finally, we're on Card Scanner. Oh my god, this card is absolute ass. The general idea is you can declare a card type, and if the bottom card of your deck is that type, you can add it to your hand, and your opponent does the same. Now, your opponent has about a 33% chance of actually hitting something. 66% of the time, they're going to be Yada locking themselves. They're going to have a hand trap, a Snake Eye Ash, they're going to have a Nox, they're going to have some sort of Imperm. While you, when you're resolving your Runick Fountain and putting Tip to the bottom of your deck, are always going to be hitting something absolutely bananas. And if you hit a trap card, say Rivalry or Skill Drain, guess what your Runick Fountain can now draw into? That's right, your win condition. So even if you whiff on Card Scanner, it is completely fine. By the way, take this garbage out in games 2 and 3. If you're going second. This card is horrible. Anyways, we are also playing Time Tearing Morganite. This card says draw 2 cards for the rest of the duel when you activate it. I don't think I need to explain why a stun deck likes to draw additional cards. There are enough scenarios where I have just been completely dead out of Runicks. I have no Runick Fountain set up, but I've just been chilling on a Skill Drain and a Rivalry, just drawing 2 cards per turn. I'm getting my cards, and then I randomly bank a Tip or a Fountain or some sort of combination of 2 Runick spells, so I can, during my opponent's end phase, just go like Slumber, Summon Hugin, discard something, grab Fountain, and get the engines rolling, and my opponent's now completely just fucked from a resource perspective and a win con perspective. So That is why I believe Morganite is an extremely powerful card. However, you never really want to, draw too many of this card, so we play it at 2. Next up, we have the most broken floodgates in the game. We've got Gozen, we've got Rivalry, and we've got There Can Be Only One. Spoiler alerts, Rivalry is kind of the only good one. It completely shuts down Snake Eye and Silent Force. Gozen has decent application versus Snake Eye, but is absolutely horrid versus Silent Force. There Can Be Only One is fucking useless. My god, this card is so ass. I don't know why we're even playing it. This is arguably the most cuttable floodgate, and you can maybe get away with playing something like a second Smiting Storm if you really wanted to, or an Upstart Goblin. Now we're playing Triple Skill Drain. This card is an FTK card versus 90% of the format, and we're playing Synchro Zone. This card has one line of text. Everything else on this card is ignorable, except this line: neither player can declare attacks except with synchro monsters. Now, what happens if you flip this card versus a deck that has no back row removal, or is completely shut down by the Runick spells negating the back row removal, or branded? Spoiler alerts, you win the game on the spot. Again, this is a card that you draw into and not a card that you actively want to open. So this is a card which we're completely fine with playing at 2 because a lot of the Runick spells act as 2-for-1 chump blockers, so you never really are in any hurry of surviving. Synchro Zone's just that little extra spice of sociopathic victory because the Runick spells can go into Gary, and then Gary can, block one attack and pop another card on the field. It's just so easy to scam out extra turns with this deck. Now onto the extra deck. We're playing double Frecky. Frecky is fine. He is the worst, in large quotations, Runick monster. He doesn't really get your game plan going. Sure, he has this mill effect, but that's not really going to be live under skill drain, but he does serve as this nice pseudo infinite loop in being able to use a quick play to summon him and immediately grab back that quick play for a follow-up turn. He's also got 2000 attack, which is relevant sometimes. Next up, we have Gary. Spoiler alerts, you're never really going to be summoning Gary for the graveyard effect of getting back Fountain. You're going to be using him mainly as a 2-for-1 chump blocker and removing specific weird floodgates and cards on your opponent's board. I remember in a game versus Zach where he flipped Imperial Iron Wall on me, I just went Gary into the battle phase, punched over a Flamberge, Gary effect, popped the Iron Wall, and then I just completely just took over the game because guess what? This deck is horrible once it gets the ball rolling. We're playing triple Hugin. This card says protect your Runick spells and all your floodgates and search Fountain, so we play it at 3, and this card infinitely recycles itself because it's broken. God damn, this card is probably gonna get banned on the next ban list, let's be real. Next up, we're playing double Munin. This is a card that I would be playing 3 copies of, mainly because of how side deck patterns are mildly starting to develop in regards to people playing more Cosmic Cyclone or Typhoon or Twin Twister or cards such as that. A lot of the times, Hugin is only going to be protecting versus 2 cards, Lightning Storm and Harpy's Feather Duster, and those cards are 2-ofs and 1-ofs respectively. However, stuff like Munin is protecting is going to be primarily versus Cosmic Cyclones, SP Little Knights, Nightmare Phoenixes. These are cards that are way more present that Hugin can't really protect against. But Munin is actually able to, even under skill drain, because Munin banishes himself for cost. Now Munin, I believe, is actually going to be the primary summon of choice if you already have Runick Fountain access instead of Hugin in games 2 and 3, because your opponent's going to be unable to really out your Runick Fountain or your Floodgates unless they open exactly something like the Harpy's Feather Duster, in which case you're the better player, or multiple copies of Cosmic Cyclone. Sleipnir is okay. This card is so mid. This card's main purpose is in the battle phase. If your opponent tries to go into something like Promethean Princess to out your Inspector border, you can summon Sleipnir during their battle phase and Sleipnir banish their Link monster. So now they're down to 0 monsters again, they can't use monster effects, and you're able to just infinitely protect your Inspector border. And yeah, overall, good little guy. We've got Gaga Cowboy to scam, we've got Bagushka to scam, we've got Typhon to scam, and we have Little Knight to scam. Good cards, $180 combo. I sure love this format. And the side deck, we have Inspector Border. We've got 2 of them. This is the primary going first side option. If you're going first in games 2 or 3, this card better be coming in for Amano, because holy hell, this card just does it all. It's like Amano, but like 100 times better. It could even beat your opponent to death because it doesn't leave the board, and it's got 2000 attack. Like, oh my god, this guy is surfing. We've got Triple Solemn Judgment just to prevent our opponent from blowing us out. We've got Double Grave of the Super Ancient Organism. I kind of think this card should be in the main deck over Gozen, and there can be only one, but this is a little too specific. It's only really good versus decks like Branded or Kashtira, and it's kind of got mediocre properties against the other decks. We've got Triple Ball. This card is being played over Lava Golem because I think that almost every single deck in this format, if they're going completely uninterrupted on their turn, which they are because we don't play any hand traps, they are always going to end on 3 monsters. And that even includes Silent Force, because Silent Force has the 3rd summon of Seravis. And I think that Sphere Mode is just overall an infinitely better monster compared to Lava Golem in these regards, as well as the fact that if you have Morganite up, you can normal summon the Sphere Mode and you're not locked out of Border or Amano Awado like you would be if you were summoning Lava Golem. So while Lava Golem does have mildly better interactions in regards to breaking boards, and you can summon multiple of them on the same turn, I think that Sphere Mode is just ultimately a little bit better for the reasons I just stated. We're playing Triple Cosmic Cyclone because I hate Silent Force, and sometimes you do need it for the mirror. 1 Harpy's Feather Duster for, again, Silent Force, because holy shit, this deck really struggles versus Silent Force because you can't really target their monsters. They have a dumbass Omni Negate, oh my god. And 1 Triple Tactics Thrust. This card will search 3 cards. You're either searching 1 Day of Peace to stall out like a little coward, you're going to search Harpy's Feather Duster for guess what? Silent Force, or you're going to be searching Card of Demise like an absolute psychopath. This is probably the only card out of every single card in this deck that is guaranteed to always be slotted in when you're going second. It is so good at just grabbing whatever you need versus every single deck in the format. It's just absolutely insane. Now when playing this deck, your main goal is to establish Fountain, find your floodgates at all costs, because spoilers, the Runick cards aren't going to win the game by themselves, and pray to god your opponent doesn't have Ash Blossom or Droll. So in this particular hand, we're going to go for a Runick Fountain with the tip, which is what you're usually going to be searching unless you already have Fountain access. We're going to be going Hugin to chain block our Fountain, grab another Fountain. We're going to deep draw. We're just going to pretend that tip was Slumber for a minute, and we're just going to keep searching. We're just going to keep drawing. We're going to keep drawing as much as humanly possible. And when you look at this particular hand, it may not seem like a lot. By the way, put your Runick tip at the bottom of the deck so Card Scanner can grab it. This hand basically just resulted in us drawing 7 cards, but those 7 cards were to add follow-up, grab some random Runick spell, and set up floodgates, which we drew into. And when you look at this board and you're playing Silent Force or Fire King Snake Eye or Pure Snake Eye, you're going to want to shoot yourself when you look at a protected Fountain and double skill drain plus infinite pain on the follow-up, because we drew Morganite, which is going to draw us 2 cards, and then we have Tip, banishing your deck, and then we have Slumber to pick apart your board, and then you're going to want to shoot yourself. And that's it for Stun 2. I think this deck is arguably the best deck in the format, as depressing as it is to say. It's got a great matchup spread outside of exactly Silent Force, which again isn't actually even that bad. It's kind of a 50-50 coin toss on who opens marginally better and who wins the dice roll. Now, I want to hear you guys' thoughts on the deck in the comments, what you would change, what you think this deck struggles into, what do you think this deck is extremely capable of. I just want to hear you guys' thoughts on the comment section down below. And yeah, play this deck and ruin your locals.